This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Thursday, June 13th. This is Africa 54.
Sudanese pro-democracy protest leaders demand international guarantees for implementing any agreement it reaches with the military council. Zimbabweans turn to herbal treatments to combat the skyrocketing cost of medicine. And still standing strong, it's International Albinism Awareness Day, a day to recognize, celebrate, and encourage people with albinism.
We begin our broadcast in Southern Africa, where the rising cost of medicine is affecting many of Zimbabwe's citizens. The Association of Healthcare Funders say the number of people seeking medical help has plummeted by 50% since last year due to rising costs of medications not covered by insurance. Many Zimbabweans are now turning to herbal treatments that health analysts warn are not always helpful. Columbus Mavunga reports from Harare.
This 51-year-old retrenched man who broke his right ankle hangs outside Zimbabwe's biggest hospital after being discharged. He has no painkillers or other drugs prescribed by the doctors to recover, and his medical insurance is not being accepted by many health institutions and pharmacies.
They said they are taking too long to pay for the services. At times we pay cash if they don't take these medications. Medically, you know, nowadays cash is very scarce to get it. That's a big challenge.
It is people like Mbambo that Zimbabwe's Association of Healthcare Funders say have stopped seeking medical treatment as cost of health services has gone beyond them, even with medical insurance. They have found the solution in medical drugs or herbs sold in streets. Their sellers do not want to be identified for obvious reasons, fear of being arrested.
These herbs really work. So, for example, if someone comes for a BP herb, after 7 days he will return here and say it has worked. The problem is gone. So it is money problems and the strength of herbs which makes people use them.
But the Zimbabwe Association for Doctors for Human Rights says the answer in the country's high cost of drugs or health services is not in herbs.
Some of the herbs that have been used by people, those are things that have not been tested in the labs. We do not know their effects on the liver. We do not know their effects on the kidneys. So you might end up actually having a kidney failure from using herbs which have not been scientifically proven and which have not been proven to be safe and effective.
The rights group wants President Emmerson Mnangagwa's government to increase its spending on health so ordinary citizens can access it. The government says it is working on the issue and it has started sourcing medical drugs. On Wednesday, the Indian government donated medicines worth $250,000.
The more medicine that we get, the less will be the cost to the client. So we are working on a plan to make sure that we fill up our warehouses, we fill up our pharmacies, to the brim. And we shall then be able to also supply, through that same mechanism, the private pharmacies. They will have to reduce their prices. And then we will end up with more patients arriving at the institutions.
That would be good news for people like Nkulile Mbambo, who cannot get the medication needed to make a full and fast recovery. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Harare.
Sudanese pro-democracy protesters and the country's military rulers are set to resume talks aimed at returning Sudan to civilian rule, according to an Ethiopian emissary. A leader of Sudan's main opposition coalition says the United States supports their efforts for a transition to a civilian government following a meeting with the top U.S. diplomat for Africa on Wednesday.
We made it very clear to the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Africa our appreciation for the U.S. role and made it very clear that The US supports the transition to civilian government, and they will support and will stand by the African initiative. He also mentioned that they are very impressed by the Sudanese revolution and hope that at the end of the road, it's able to achieve its goals.
The army, which has been in control since longtime President Omar al-Bashir was ousted in April, has agreed to release political prisoners. Meanwhile, the United States has appointed veteran diplomat Donald Booth to serve as a special envoy for Sudan. Booth has previously served as a special envoy for Sudan and South Sudan under the Obama administration. A man from the U.S. state of North Carolina will spend the rest of his life in prison after pleading guilty to charges of the senseless murder of a newlywed Muslim couple and the bride's sister. Craig Hicks was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms behind bars on Wednesday on charges of firing a weapon indoors. Hicks burst into an apartment and killed University of North Carolina dental student Dea Barakat, his new wife Yusol Abu Salha, and her sister Razan Absalha in February 2015. Hicks says he was provoked and infuriated because he believed the 3 were taking up too many parking spaces at an apartment building. Prosecutors say the 3 did not park in Hicks' space, and they say he targeted them because they were Muslim. The victim's family wanted to pursue federal hate crime charges against Hicks, but investigators say there was not enough evidence. Air transport in Africa is critical in facilitating business, international trade, and tourism. Across the continent, several countries are racing to relaunch their defunct national carriers, even though these airlines were not profitable and survived on government financial support to stay solvent. Africa 54's Paul Ndiho explains.
The International Air Transport Association says Ethiopian Airlines is arguably Africa's most successful airline. It leads the continent's air carriers in revenues, number of aircraft, routes are operated in Africa, and profitability. Ethiopian Airlines has the goal to become Africa's largest airline by 2025. Industry analysts say the growth of Ethiopian Airlines is outpacing its regional competitors to become Africa's largest airline with a fleet of over 100 planes. The carrier services dozens of destinations in Africa, Asia, South America, and the United States.
Airlines are now growing 5 to 6%, maximum 10% in any part of the world, but we are growing 20% plus. So this is impressive by any standard in the industry.
Despite the success of Ethiopian Airlines, other regional carriers have not been as successful. The International Air and Transport Association says the aviation industry overall is expected to make significant profits in 2019, but African airlines are projected to continue losing money. In 2017, Kenya Airways lost money despite cutting its losses by 51% to $97 million compared to $150 million posted the previous year. Last October, Kenya Airways announced its first ever direct non-stop flight from Nairobi to New York. The carrier operates the route using the Boeing 7878 Dreamliner aircraft. The transatlantic flight is part of an effort to revive the airline's fortunes after it nearly collapsed, leading to a $2 billion restructuring in November that included a government bailout which reduced the stake of Air France and KLM in the African carrier.
This is going to increase 2019 revenues by roughly 10% of what we have today.
South African Airways, another intercontinental national carrier, has also not been profitable. The airline has lost billions of dollars in the last 7 years, recording a loss of $153 million in 2017. Critics say without a government bailout, the airline is unlikely to survive. However, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is pledging to fully revive the troubled national carrier. Uganda is trying to revive and relaunch Uganda Airlines, nearly 2 decades after the national carrier collapsed.
Commercial operations will start beginning of July this year, and we will start with a few routes.
Air Tanzania bounced back, announcing the purchase of a Boeing 7878 Dreamliner package valued at $224 million. It's slated to be the flagship aircraft for Air Tanzania fleet, the wings of Kilimanjaro. Later this month, Air Tanzania's Boeing 7878 will launch 4 weekly flights between Dar es Salaam and Johannesburg. And in July 2019, another additional flight between Dar es Salaam and Mumbai. Rwanda Air, the state-owned flagship carrier of Rwanda, operates domestic and international flights across Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia from its headquarters at Kigali International Airport. But some critics say Rwanda Air may be too optimistic for its financial expectations and is operating on losses. Paul Ndiho, VOA News.
An investigation by a partner of the good governance group, the Enough Project, says family and friends of the former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila used a little-known investment firm to acquire stakes in Congolese banks involved in money laundering. VOA's Alzuma Compaore spoke with one of the report's authors, John Diloso, and asked him about evidence that more than $100 million circulated through accounts held by the firm Kwanza Capital.
But the report really lays out in meticulous way the structure of this company and lays out all of its links with the Kabila family and people who act as kind of intermediaries for them. And then we also talk about 3 efforts that Kwanza Capital was involved in some way, more direct in some than others, to acquire stakes in commercial banks. And the statistics that's really shocking there is that if you were to calculate the total amount or the total value of the banks that Kwanza Capital and its affiliates targeted, that is 28% of a $5 billion banking sector. That is a considerable takeover attempt, if you want to call it that. So it's really important to show that. And then finally, you know, the third part of the report, which is frankly a little dense, but I do suggest that people take a look at it, expert or not, because it's important to understand that not only do people go through extraordinary means to hide their money and to move their ill-gotten gains in a way that prevents people like us from finding it, but also it's really important to see all of the different parties along the way that really have to help an actor in Congo move that money.
And the work that you guys are doing there, it's all about, you know, you said it yourself, following the money. You know, so what is one, discovery that, you know, in the process of following the money you had? What was that aha moment where you was like, this is what we have? Can you take us there?
For me personally, one of the more interesting aha moments was finding a press release that a Chinese company had put out on their website, actually multiple press releases. So this is information that anybody, you know, with a mouse and a computer could have found, but it was hidden in plain sight. And actually that information was quite important in us making the case that Kwanza was in fact behind an effort to have a Chinese bank take over a Congolese bank that had been in some serious financial difficulty for a long time. So that was a real aha moment.
What's next now?
You know, our mission is not just to kind of, you know, write a report and plop it on a desk and walk away. What we really do is we engage with the people who can take action, whether it's civil society in Congo, whether it's you know, a financial institution or a national authority. We do intend to talk to these individuals and make a case for why some sort of follow-up action on their part is a really important thing.
So this is the test, the first test for new President Tshisekedi?
Yeah, it's important to show these kinds of acts of grand corruption in the hopes that there can be some sort of justice for the everyday citizen of Congo who may, for example, really need to get access to credit to start a small business in the country. But because the bank sector has really been, I would say, devastated by these kinds of activities, they may not have that opportunity.
That was John Diloso from the Central Initiative of the Enough Project speaking with VOA's Alzuma Compaore. VOA contacted some of the Congolese investors named in the report and members of the former president's political party. We're waiting for their response. We'll be right back.
The lyrics could Portuguese,
Bantu,
Arabic.
It is the beat.
The African beat that counts.
The beat does all the translations.
It cuts across all languages and gives us the understanding that this is the African beat.
It is so distinct
and adhesive.
It binds us together.
African beat on the Voice of America. For more information, visit our website at www.voanews.com/AfricanBeat.
I am Sheikh Sali, host and senior editor of VOA's international call-in talk show, Straight Talk Africa.
Today we'll examine the tobacco industry.
We pretty much touch on anything that you can think of. Politics, health issues, human rights issues, you name it, we talk about it. The issues that we discuss are pertinent to most people on the African continent. A very, very rare and unique opportunity to interact with their leaders.
The U.S. Midwestern state of Iowa is at the center of the race for the White House in 2020. The large field of candidates seeking the Democratic nomination are trying to build momentum and support ahead of the nationally televised debates this summer. VOA's Ken Farabaugh reports on the hopes and concerns of Democrat Party voters who will choose a candidate in Iowa caucuses in early 2020.
From the ballrooms to the brew halls.
It's good to be back in Hawkeye country. I tell you what, man, it's been a while.
The campaign for the Democratic nomination for president is underway in the state of Iowa. The focus of the crowded field of candidates, 24 by last count, is centered on one topic, or rather, one person.
Defeating Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
But before they can challenge President Donald Trump in the November 2020 general election, candidates first need to win the support of Iowa Democrats, such as Michael Ryan. Iowa is the first contest in early 2020 where voters choose their preference for the candidate to challenge Trump.
I'm ready for somebody young and new to take over.
That's why Ryan is backing 37-year-old South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg, the first major presidential candidate who is openly gay.
Because he's young, articulate, fresh, new.
I think women need to have more of a voice in what's going on.
Former Iowa State Senator Beverly Hannon.
I was elected in 1984 to the Democratic caucus in the Iowa Senate. I was the only woman and 29 men.
Says she is encouraged by the record number of women running for the Democratic nomination this election cycle. But her support is behind Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders,
In the need to defeat Trump,
who identifies as a Democratic socialist.
I think it's a scandal that we don't have universal health care here, and that's one of the reasons I really like Bernie.
For Cedar Rapids voter Teresa Kyle, 2020 is all about one issue.
The $15 minimum wage.
She believes former Vice President Joe Biden, currently the frontrunner in early polling, is the best candidate to deliver on the issue.
He's fighting for our minimum wage, housing, hopefully.
While Iowa Democratic Party voters are currently split on who should get the opportunity, most say in the end they will support the nominee and are united in their opposition to President Trump.
I think Donald Trump's been a disaster for the country.
I would really like to see us get back to where somebody more respectful is in the White House, that respects the presidency, that works for all the people, doesn't call other people names.
The path to the White House for Democrats runs through Iowa, scheduled on February 3rd, 2020, the current date for voters to choose their nominee at caucus locations statewide. Whoever ultimately wins could face an uphill battle at the ballot boxes in the November 2020 general election in Iowa, a swing state President Trump and Republicans won decidedly in the 2016 presidential election. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
It's time for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with news on Ebola development in Uganda.
That's right. Ebola is in Uganda, and the Ugandan Health Ministry confirmed Thursday that a Congolese woman had become the second patient in Uganda to die of Ebola in the latest outbreak of the disease. The woman was the grandmother of a 5-year-old boy who died on Tuesday evening after crossing into Uganda with his family from the Democratic Republic of Congo. The World Health Organization says 27 others in contact with the family are now under close monitoring. Uganda's health ministry says frontline health workers are to be vaccinated Friday with a new drug designed to protect them against the virus. Meanwhile, the health ministry is banning all public gatherings in the Kasese district in western Uganda, where the outbreak of the deadly Ebola virus has been confirmed. New estimates from the World Health Organization are highlighting need for increased sustained investment in the development of mental health services in areas affected by conflict. 1 in 5 people living in an area affected by conflict has depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia. About 9% of conflict-affected populations have a moderate to severe mental health condition, according to an analysis of 129 studies published in the medical journal The Lancet. The figures are substantially higher than the global estimate for these mental health conditions in the general population, which stands at 1 in 14 people. Depression and anxiety appear to increase with age in conflict settings, and depression was more common among women than men.
Policy implications are that in emergencies, we need to make available mental health care. And how do we do that? We make mental health care available at any point where health care is made available. So at any point, whether it's primary health care, secondary care, emergency hospital, there should be at least one person on staff who's capable of assessing and managing mental health conditions. Given that these conditions that they last, that this is more than just an acute emergency issue, it's very important to build mental health services so that when the society seeks to recovers from the conflict, that there's mental health services available.
The findings suggest that past studies underestimated the burden of mental health conditions in conflict-affected areas. Nearly 69 million people worldwide have been forcibly displaced by violence and conflict, the highest number since World War II. Now, the world is celebrating International Albinism Awareness Day Thursday, and this year's theme is Still Standing Strong. The day is set aside by the United Nations to celebrate the human rights of people with albinism. Albinism is a human condition. It's a congenital disorder characterized by the complete or partial absence of pigment in the skin, hair, and eyes. Medical experts say people with albinism are prone to skin problems like cancer. Albinism also affects the eyes and causes low vision. In some societies around the world, persons with albinism suffer from marginalization and social exclusion due to their physical appearance. In some cases, they are victims of brutal attacks and murder, often because of witchcraft and superstition. Observers say more needs to be done to ensure the wellness and well-being of people with albinism in Africa. Joining me now live via Skype from Abuja, Nigeria, is Mr. Jake Epele. He is CEO and founder of the Albino Foundation of Nigeria. Mr. Epele is also a United Nations Albinism Champion and Executive Director of the Regional Albinism Forum Africa, an umbrella organization of albinism interventions organizations in Africa. Mr. Epele, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
So today is the day to raise awareness for people living with albinism. What does the theme mean to you, Still Standing Strong?
Well, it's just an indication that our advocacy is paying off and that we're not giving up on the fight. to get people to recognize the fact that even though we have these conditions, we're human beings. In Nigeria, we've added an appendix to that theme, and the appendix says, still standing strong, advancing albinism cause in Nigeria.
So, Mr. Pele, I mentioned earlier some of the challenges that people living with albinism are confronted with. What would you say are the biggest challenges right now, especially in your setting where you live?
Well, I think there are three major challenges. Number one is discrimination and stigmatization, stereotypes, a myth. The second and the biggest is health issues like skin cancer, visual impairment. But skin cancer is big, is the biggest issue right now. The foundation is working with Nigerian government, and in a couple of years, we have treated 4,300 persons with skin cancer. And that's a far cry to the realities that is on ground.
Yeah.
And of course, the issue of the persons with albinism not being mainstreamed into various government projects and programs. So you find exclusion as one of our major issue that we're battling here in Nigeria.
So what is your message then, Mr. Pele, when you raise awareness? What do you hope to see?
We hope to see more engagement of the community. We hope to see funding by state actors and non-state actors in various thematic issues surrounding albinism. We hope to see parents give opportunity for children with albinism to go to school, to enjoy inclusive education that the various governments in Africa are championing. We hope to see integration of persons with albinism in social sectors, in social issues. You know that part of the issues with persons with albinism in Africa is that they're ostracized. Yes. They're treated like outcasts.
Yes.
You know, and this issue starts from family. You find a situation where persons with albinism face discrimination in their home, where the mother will call you names, mothers will call us names, fathers will call us names, ridicule us before our siblings, and of course, we lose respect, we lose self-esteem, you know, and then you go to school, it's worse than school.
Okay, Mr. Pele, we have to leave it there. We wish you a great celebration and all the best in your work. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And that was Jacob Pele. He's CEO and founder of the Albino Foundation of Nigeria. And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter @LenorMoudou. Esther?
Thank you. Fantastic segment. Lino will join you again on Tuesday. And that's our show for today. Have a good evening.